For centuries, Tibet, often referred to as the roof of the world, has held the West spellbound with its remoteness and mystical allure. Located at the heart of Asia, it is bordered to the south by India, Nepal, Bhutan and Burma, to the west by China, and to the north by East Turkestan, or Xinjiang, as it is known under Chinese rule. The country has a total area of 2.5 million square kilometers, the majority of which is made up of the vast Tibetan plateau, with an average altitude of 3,659 meters, or 11,800 feet above sea level, and bordered by some of the highest mountain ranges on Earth, the Karakoram, Kunlun, Altai Tag, and of course, the Himalayas. Tibet straddles 2,500 kilometers from east to west, and in this huge area originate four important rivers: the Sutlej, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, and the Yangtze. Although Tibet now boasts growing cities like Shigatse and Lhasa, much of the remaining 6 million Tibetans continue to eke out a rural existence as farmers, growing crops like barley, rice, and potatoes, and as semi-nomadic herdsmen grazing yaks, sheep, and other livestock. Mr. Thupten Chokful of Mussoorie, India, talks about his life prior to the Chinese invasion.
In my family, most of them are farmers, but some became traders also. And my father was in the military background also.
And his wife, Penzok Doma, reminisces about her home in Tibet.
Yes, I remember it's very beautiful village, very nice. And everywhere you look, and as you look, in that village, we are the biggest family member, and we had the biggest house. And then every day, whenever we go to our house, like we will go upstairs and you can watch the Himalaya just right there.
Well, my childhood, just when I was just a little kid, I was in Shigatse, brought up in a city, second biggest city in Tibet. So in those villages, for children, we have a lot of fun, because in the farm you have so many yaks and sheep and so on, and with their babies, we can play a lot, And in my childhood, I used to climb those high hills and try to pluck flowers, and even go to the riverside to play with water. Those kind of things I remember.
Anyone who has traveled to Tibet or to one of the many refugee enclaves in India, such as the famous Dharamsala and the hill station of Mussoorie, can attest to the general intelligence and good-naturedness of the Tibetan people. A large majority of Tibetans are practicing Buddhists, most of whom continue to venerate His Holiness the Dalai Lama as supreme ruler and spiritual head. The 14th Dalai Lama currently resides in Dharamsala, located in the foothills of the Indian Himalayas. In 1959, the Chinese army marched into the capital city of Lhasa after a 10-year struggle to establish control in the region, and there ensued one of the most brutal genocides the world has ever seen. Over 50,000 Tibetans died in an attempt to defend their homeland, but the Chinese forces proved overwhelming. Monasteries and other holy sites were desecrated and thousands of monks killed, while His Holiness the Dalai Lama was forced to flee over the High Himalaya into India, where he would establish his government in exile. One of the Dalai Lama's first tasks was to find a way to accommodate and educate the many young Tibetans who had fled with him and who continued to arrive in India over the next 38 years. The first school he set up was a Tibetan home school in Mussoorie, located at the site of his initial Indian residence. The General Secretary of the Tibetan Homes Foundation speaks about the Dalai Lama's mandate for his people.
I think the best and the most useful is education of the children and all health projects. And education of the children is very important, and especially for us, because we have to get back our country and we have to work for the future Tibet. And in other ways, we can't fight with the Chinese only us children must be very educated, you know.
Today, there exist a total of 85 Tibetan schools in India, Nepal and Bhutan with an enrollment of close to 28,000 students. This video looks at the Tibetan school in Mussoorie and the brave children who leave Tibet in search of a better education in India. Mussoorie lies in the first range of the Indian Himalaya at an altitude of 2,000 meters or 7,000 feet. The Tibetan school is nestled in a community known as Happy Valley, and it currently enrolls over 1,000 students. A large majority which left Tibet sometime within the last 10 years in order to receive an education in India. The headmistress of the senior school, Modos Tsangmo.
At the moment we have 1,223, that's as on yesterday. Because I have to say this number as on today, because we are getting a lot of children from Tibet since the 1986. So the children who come from Tibet, they do not have a fixed time for coming, and we do not have a fixed time for admission like other schools, you know, in India and all over. So the children in small batches of 10, 15 and maybe 5, they come every month.
Tibetan children newly arrived at the Tibetan school in Mussoorie relate tales of astounding and often depressing journeys as they flee from their homelands over the High Himalaya. Dharamsala alone processes over 300 young refugees a year. What motivates them to leave their home, family, basically their whole lives to come to India? The children speak about their lives in Tibet prior to leaving. 10-year-old Samduk Champul from Kham province.
Going to a school in which one building was for Chinese students and the other was for us Tibetans. I could feel there was a discrimination because Tibetans are poor, so they can't afford it. Therefore, the teachers are not so good compared to the ones the Chinese received.
10-year-old Tunzuk Yugyan.
My father was a farmer. One time while working in the field, he crossed a boundary and the Chinese got angry and shot him. He did not get killed at that time. He was taken to the hospital and he recovered. But later, while getting water, 2 Chinese policemen pushed him and he fell on some stones, and now he's bedridden.
Yeah, the main reason that they come is they want to get a good education, that they want to get a good education in the real sense of the word. There are schools in Tibet, in some cities like Shigatse and Lhasa, but what we have learned from first-hand information is that these schools do not have English, or these schools do not have a proper Tibetan, you know, in the sense that they may be taught just the language, but not Tibetan history, not Tibetan culture. And then if somebody's, then there are some schools in Tibet, you know, where they have to pay quite a lot of fees also. And I believe that some of the schools are not managed properly or not run properly. As a result, a lot of children are spoiled, a lot of children are getting, you know, out of school. There are a lot of school dropouts. So what the thing is, if they go to India and study under the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans, the parents as well as students feel that they will get a better education. They will get an education which will prepare them for a better life.
For Samduk Champul, who came from a broken home in Lhasa, the reasons for leaving seem like those of someone much older.
If I look at one side, I can say that I enjoyed the school, but from my parents' point of view, they didn't like me being in that school. At times when fees were collected, it was very expensive. They had to give almost 1,000 yuan per month, which made me feel that we would go bankrupt.
With the coaxing of his parents, Samduk joined a group of India-bound students led by a refugee smuggler, a common occupation in the Himalayas, and fled towards the border. But Samduk met with hardship early in the journey.
When I tried to come to India, I was caught in Shigatse and they put me in prison. So I climbed the door and escaped. There were 2 other boys with me, but it was dark and they got scared, so they decided to turn back.
Eventually, and out of sheer luck, Samduk got a ride back to Lhasa with a friendly Chinese truck driver. 2 months later, he attempted to flee again, and this time he crossed successfully into Nepal. This is not an unusual story. Many children face capture by the Chinese border guard and are returned to their homes or punished. Those who avoid capture instead face the hazards of the High Himalaya. The spine of the Great Himalaya runs almost 2,000 kilometers from east to west and spans several countries. It has an average width of 150 kilometers and boasts the highest mountain on Earth, Chomolungma, otherwise known as Mount Everest, at 8,848 meters, and other famous mountains. Tibetan refugees smuggling into India often attempt the journey during the cold winter months in order to avoid the Chinese and Nepalese border guards. They generally sleep during the day, traveling only at night, and in the higher altitudes must sometimes endure temperatures of minus 40 degrees Celsius and below. What is more, the trip may take more than 1 month to complete. Veterans of this ordeal discuss their crossings and the dangers that they encountered. Mr. Tuptum Chofo crossed in 1959.
Bag of mules on my own. I was so small, but then it had loads on the back. On top of that, I was tied, and then just had to go for many hours, And I was crying all the time, just what was happening. I didn't know. It was very cold. I was really completely, actually, wrapped with very thick blanket type. That it's a ship wool. So from the top, I was feeling my ears were almost frozen, just I can feel that coldness of, especially around evening time.
Anyway, I still remember it was so cold that like one night, we came by walking. So we had few yaks also just to carry our luggage. And when we were traveling, when we reached middle of the Himalaya, we were traveling. Anyway, at night we have to sleep there on the snow. And anyway, I remember because it was terrible. It was so cold, but whole night, they made the Tibetan tea, butter tea, and they keep giving, giving the people to everyone, and we were having. And then my mother, especially, she was just to keep warm and eating more butter and salt mixed together. And then even if we didn't want to drink, but still she was forcing us to drink, just to keep us warm, maybe. And then next morning when we got up, it was so, we were like middle of the Mount Everest. So that's why this thing. We didn't have glasses or anything, just to protect our eyes. So what we did, my mother, cut that yak's tail, and she made some sort of, she made something like glasses, dark glasses. She made us to wear that, so that she says like it will, it will protect your eyes.
It was very difficult. We all had Nepali porters who would help us get to Nepal. It was night and a Nepali man was helping a little girl. Suddenly the two of them fell down into a steep crevasse. It was sheer luck, or God saved them. It was very far down, but they caught onto a branch.
Some travelers were lucky and somehow managed to trek over the passes with few mishaps. Others, however, were not so fortunate.
Some of them, they finished their food, whatever they carried, they were just dying. We saw them, they're half dead. Now I can see, it's just like, we can see they can't talk, they were just, they were in middle of the snow, they were just watching, looking at us, and my mother tried to give them something, to drink. Still they couldn't swallow because they were just dying. So we saw them, and even the animals also, yaks also, and people also.
Fifteen people went ahead of us. Me and another lady stayed back. A snowstorm hit, and later, when we left, as we were walking, we saw a lot of the dead bodies lying in the snow. On the way, I felt, even if I die, I won't mind if I'm cold. I'm going to India.
Some, like Tsamcho, must bear the scars of their terrible trial for the rest of their lives.
There were 23 of us. We walked in waist-deep snow. It was November, so it was snowing. The smaller children were carried by some others on their backs, and me and some others kept walking, and 7 of us got frostbite. and my toes were amputated. None who came with me died, but we saw many people buried in the snow before us. There were many children also. It was very sad. All the bodies were buried.
Besides suffering from frostbite, she also continues to endure eye problems due to the severe snow blindness she had in the mountains.
I want to be a doctor because of what I have experienced.
Many relate the exhilaration they felt with that first view of the other side of the High Himalaya, but the troubles don't necessarily end for those who survive the trek. They must also successfully cross into Nepal, Bhutan or India. It is no secret that many of the border guards are corrupt and certainly not beyond accepting bribes. Those who cannot afford to pay the guards off are usually arrested or forced to turn back and all possessions are confiscated. 13-year-old Nawang Chita talks about his border crossing.
When we came to the border, the Nepalese police caught us and they took all of our luggage, good clothes and money. And then they searched our shoes to see if we were hiding anything. They made us kneel for a long time just to please the chief of police. But finally, we were released in exchange for our possessions. Then we came into Nepal.
Life changes quickly for the Tibetans who arrive in places like Nepal. All new arrivals must head for one of the several Tibetan refugee processing centers, where they are given lodging, clothes, food, money for the rest of the journey, and most importantly, legal documents with which they can travel between countries. Those Tibetans who move on to India are first sent to Delhi, used as a halfway point, and then continue on to Dharamsala, home of the Tibetan government in exile and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In India, the children try to adjust with their new surroundings, without parents, without any family. This is usually a difficult process. The headmistress explains the routine for receiving refugee children.
Once they come here, they must get registered in the main office, that is the Homes Foundation office, and from there they'll be sent to the different homes. And before they really go to the different homes, they must get a checkup from the dispensary to see if they haven't got any major health problems like infectious disease or things like that. If somebody has an infectious disease, they'll be kept in the dispensary for some days, and after that they'll be sent to homes. And 1 or 2 days after, going to the homes, they'll come to the school.
The Tibetan school in Mussoorie, which is a part of the Tibetan Homes Foundation, does what it can to accommodate the new arrivals. The campus is laid out like a village with numerous dormitories and supervised homes, which essentially comprise a large orphanage known as SOS. Facilities include a dispensary and community temple where prayer sessions are held regularly. As it is uncertain when a child will be arriving at the school, admissions are open, and a new arrival, after being processed in Dharamsala, is required to enroll in a special orientation course for 1 year. After 1 year, the student takes on a full course load.
Into root C, then you can write root 9.
As an English medium school designed to prepare students for Indian universities, all the core courses are offered: maths, sciences, and of course, English. Hindi is offered as a third language course. And there are some specialty classes like knitting and sewing, and physical education. One of the main thrusts of the program, however, is to secure the survival of the Tibetan culture. The program is manifested in several ways. Tibetan is taught at all levels. By the end of their career, students will have learned both traditional and standard scripts. In the school's vocational center, students learn professional tailoring of Tibetan garments. But perhaps the most impressive are the art classes. The contemporary art class is dedicated to perfecting the techniques of sketching and oil painting. Many of the pieces depict strong Tibetan themes. In the religious art class, students undertake the rigorous and highly disciplined study of recreating famous scenes from Tibetan Buddhist tradition. This is painstaking, detailed work that requires steady hands and almost superhuman concentration. The Vocational Center provides those students who are academically weak or who have certain disabilities to participate fully in the program and to secure a future for themselves. Traditional Tibetan music is also fostered at all levels. In the junior school, children learn old songs from the country, while in later years, popular folk songs are studied. Dance is also pursued vigorously, and those students who so choose may work their way into professional Tibetan dance troupes from Dharamsala, which are famous for their performances worldwide. Perhaps the most important question is whether or not the children who risk their lives to come to India feel they are receiving a worthwhile education.
Although I am away from my parents, I still feel happy because I don't have to suffer under the Chinese.
And their perception of education is very clear.
Education is the best weapon for anything. Otherwise, as a laborer, you might get injured. The best thing that you can do is get an education.
Samcho wants to pass on this message to fellow Tibetans and students in the West.
Whatever work you do, you should not lose courage. You should not lose hope. Where there's a will, there's a way. You should be determined and have strong willpower.
The culmination of all their hard studies is, of course, graduation day, the end of another hard journey. Senior students graduate in the spring of each year. This year's top students were Tashi out of the girls and Kelsin Tsring out of the boys. In a long, emotional ceremony, the graduates pay homage to a portrayal of the Dalai Lama and listen to advice from their mentors, followed by a formal tea with their teachers. Tashi and Kelsang will both be attending Indian universities this fall, and they are anxious to begin their new careers. They look back fondly at their years at the Tibetan home school and pass on to people elsewhere a bit of their knowledge gained.
For all of you people in the West who can afford an education, study as much as you can.
One would think that the Tibetans hold the communist Chinese in contempt, given the rocky history between the two peoples. And in fact, many of the Tibetan children admit that it is hard to forgive the Chinese police for the brutalities committed against their family members in Tibet. However, the Dalai Lama has always promoted a campaign of non-violence, as is clear in his statement from the Tibetan Bulletin. This spirit of peace is an integral part of the ethos of the Tibetan school.
Because we have to fight for the truth through non-violence. So for this education for the children, very good education is very important. So anyone who wants to help for the education is, I think, most useful at this moment.
Learn to accept fate. We are mostly Buddhists who believe in the karmic action of our past actions. And His Holiness Dalai Lama is always telling us, has been keeping on telling us that do not hate the Chinese. You know, you hate somebody's deed, but not the person.
And such words are only one of the reasons why the children take the high road to India.